Hi, this is Charles Berman from the Bronze Age of Radio. We've got here a interview I did in 2008 on the 17th of February on the Bronze Age of Radio with a very important person, David Oates, the founder of the field of reverse speech, which allows you to listen to someone's speech in reverse and hear the hidden subconscious messages that they are unknowingly, unwittingly leaving in what they're saying. And David Oates was on the line from Australia. We got quite a good line, although there was sort of a delay. And his field hasn't really been picked up or validated by mainstream science yet, but one thing that's certain is that he was a very interesting and well-prepared interview subject. So let's listen to David Oates here on the Bronze Age of Radio.
Thank you, Self. I am Chris, played by Charles Berman. You are the audience, that's a radio you're listening to, and this program is the Bronze Age of Radio. And we have with us a very important guest this evening. He is David Oates. Are you there, Mr. Oates?
Yes, I am. Hi, how are you?
Good, very well. Thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome.
And you're an expert, am I right, on reverse speech analysis?
Sorry, say that again. No, your audio was a bit faint.
On reverse speech.
Right, yeah, well, I'm the founder of the field of reverse speech. The theory is that language is bi-level, forwards as well as reverse, and as all of us are speaking, we're creating our speech sounds in such a way that we're saying two things at once. One is forwards from the conscious mind, and the other one is in reverse from the unconscious mind.
So
by simply playing...
Oh, go on, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, so by simply playing human speech in reverse, about once every 30 seconds or so, you'll get a fairly clear, grammatically correct sentence that I maintain is what we are thinking and feeling unconsciously.
Now, when typically you play a recording of someone speaking in reverse, it doesn't, at first hearing, sound like much of anything. Is that something you just have to listen to over and over again to catch it, or is it another almost language?
Oh, right. Well, when you run any section of speech in reverse, you're going to be confronted with a variety of different sounds. Most of them are meaningless sounds, but every now and then these sounds come together to form a sentence. It's quite plain to hear. You don't have to really stretch your ears hard. You'll be running the tape along and you'll hear like 30 seconds of gibberish, and then suddenly right in the middle of the gibberish there'll be this very clear backwards message. So, yeah, they're occurring on fairly regular intervals, and they come in grammatically correct sentences that usually relate to what's being spoken forward, so it's hard to put it down to coincidence of sounds because of the frequency in which they are occurring.
Now, how much does this affect day-to-day communication, such as if I walk by and I hear someone speaking to me, how much of that reverse speech do I pick up?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah. Well, we maintain that reverse speech is a communication process. That is the unconscious mind communicating, and we are hearing the reversals on an unconscious level all the time. It explains some aspects of intuition or that gut sense or feeling that there's more to what someone is saying than meets the eye. So yes, I maintain it plays a very active role in unconscious communication and accounts for some of our abilities to perceive and to know and to feel that there's more to what someone is saying.
I see. So when you look at a reverse speech file, or when you hear someone in reverse playing it back to front, what kind of content do you get from that? Grammatically correct sentences of what variety get pulled out?
Like how many will you get?
Or what kind of sentences will they be?
Oh, what kind of sentences? Oh, well, they will be sentences ranging to just conscious thoughts that you're having at the time. Like you might be talking to someone and being quite polite to them, but don't know them, and so you will get that. But don't like them, and you will get that thought come out in reverse. It's basically whatever you're thinking and feeling at the time of speaking. Yeah, well, why don't I play you an example of this to illustrate the point?
Okay.
Here is Hillary Clinton at the 2004 Democratic Convention. So let's just run this forward first. Oops, I'm sorry, that was the reverse. Let's do the forwards.
12 years ago, when our country needed new leadership, Americans selected a Democrat.
And we play a small section of this backwards, and you'll hear her say, "I surely would fit in." Here we go.
I surely would fit in.
And that's straight backwards.
I surely would fit in.
That sounds pretty clear, yeah.
Thoughts. Yeah, she will fit in. She will become part. She sees herself as a potential. Now, this was back in 2004. She sees herself as a potential candidate for the nomination of the Democratic Party. I surely would fit in. And if we play the whole sentence backwards, we'll do that. You'll hear the gibberish, and then this very clear phrase amongst the gibberish. So here we go. And you can hear that right amongst the gibberish there. You'll hear meaningless sounds of gibberish, and then this clear phrase, bang, right in the middle of the gibberish.
Mm-hmm. Now, that was something that was probably a speech that she wrote beforehand or had someone write for her,
right.
But that sentence came through pretty clearly in the speech. Do you think people plan reverse speech impressions in the speeches that they write, or does that come across unconsciously in the writing of the speech?
Oh no, it's purely unconscious activity. It would be almost impossible to plan these reverse phrases. I don't actually think they're coming from the speech writers. They're occurring by the unique way in which we pronounce our speech at the time of speaking. So even though someone else wrote the speech, it's still Hillary Clinton's voice speaking. And if someone else had read that same speech, you would not get that same line. I surely would fit in. So it's got nothing to do with the words. It's really to do with the sounds and the individual vocal patterns of the speaker.
Now, when you analyze something for this, it's basically a process of taking the whole recording and going over it. Just to find those small sections like I surely would fit in, and that's
step
where.
By step.
Pardon?
Yeah, it's a step-by-step. It's a very painstaking process. It's not an easy technology to master. Basically, you're sitting at the computer going through hours and hours of tapes, section by section, and so it's a painstaking, exacting process to find them, and you need a good ear to be able to hear those sounds amongst the gibberish. If you blink for a second, you can miss one. So you've got to have all your concentration about you as you are finding the backward phrases.
And can you ever tell before you actually analyze it what sort of content you might get, or get a feeling of what someone's getting across?
Before you analyse it for reversal?
Yeah.
Yes, you can get a feel. I must admit, I don't totally trust that, because I'm afraid that if I have a preconceived idea, it's going to bias and taint my findings. So I try not to have a preconceived idea, but it's hard not to, and often what I thought has turned out to be accurate. There's some fairly stunning examples where I thought one thing and found something else completely different in reverse. But I generally have a fairly good idea. But once again, you don't want to try to taint your findings by going into it with preconceived ideas and notions.
What are some examples of practical ways this might be used in the public sphere or in the private sphere? Ways people might take advantage of the fact that this can be done.
Oh, well, there's many practical applications to it. The applications in investigative, in the police investigative work alone is really quite exciting. For example, here's a clip from Scott Peterson, who who was convicted of murdering his wife, and he's now sitting on death row, and here he is being interviewed on TV prior to the trial, and a reporter asks him, well, how do you, so the reporter says to him, well, did you murder your wife?
Did you murder your wife? No, I did not.
And he replies by, no, I did not.
No, I did not.
And then you run this in reverse, and you hear him say, neck, I hit hard. So he's flashing back to the crime scene, remembering how he killed his wife. He hit her hard on the back of the neck. So here we go, neck, hit hard.
Neck, I hit hard.
Oh, I hit hard.
Neck, I hit hard.
So that's a fairly sort of dramatic confession from Scott Peterson. It shows some of the uses in forensic work. The police are using it on a very limited fashion. There's only 2 or 3 departments who are currently experimenting with it, but it does show some fairly stunning applications of reverse speech. There's a current controversy right now around Joran van der Sloot, and you may remember he was a man who was recently recorded secretly admitting to disposing of Natalie Holloway's body on the island of Aruba. Here is he speaking.
Because of them had a driver's license, but not all of them.
Now we hear a reversal here that says, what a murder.
What a murder. What a murder.
And again.
What a murder.
So that shows you some of the forensic applications. There's 2 cases, one which has currently been decided. Joran van der Sloot has not been re-arrested for the crime, so that's a case that's still up in the air, but I've got some fairly damning reversals on Joran that would suggest that he's involved in Natalie Holloway's murder.
Now, how quick have police forces around the world or around Australia been to pick up on using reverse speech? Because it sounds like this can be pretty influential in finding who's sending out signals, at least, that they might have been involved in things.
Yeah, well, the police service was fairly slow to pick it up. I've worked on a couple of cases with the New South Wales police, and one very notable case I worked on, they were looking for the murder weapon, and the reversals pointed to a location where the weapon could be found, and the police found it exactly where the background message said it would be. The Oregon State Police have used reverse speech on about a half a dozen cases now, with fairly good success in the investigative avenue. Anyway, a lot of the usage though is in the field of therapy. That's where it's been picked up mainly by the psychotherapeutic community, and therapists can use it to get an insight into their clients' problems and issues, and how to work with them, and come to some solutions.
So when it's used in therapy, a therapist will record the subject and then analyze it backwards and find out some of what the subject is thinking that's maybe not coming across on the surface?
Yeah, absolutely. It will lead to inner problems and issues here, and it'll often give us some ideas on what to work on. For example, here's a client here, and she's talking about money issues. Let's just run this forward.
She and I need to work this issue out, but it started to bring up all my money fears and stuff. And the thing is if I know I start sparking fear again, then I go,
yeah, no, you don't want to do that.
And this reversal says, work on my grief.
Work on my grief. Work on my grief.
And so that's giving us an avenue to look into. Obviously, her money issues has got something to do with grief. It may have taken several sessions in regular therapy to come to that core issue of her money, which is grief. And so here she is giving us a therapeutic direction to work in and to move towards. And that can short-circuit the the time of therapy by quite a stunning amount. And let me see if I can get another classic example that shows how we can how it's used in therapy. Yeah, here's a really good one. This is an Australian accent. I hope it's okay to hear.
Oh, yeah.
It's the woman who's having relationship problems, and she breaks up with her boyfriends every 3 or 4 months. And in this section, she's talking about the last time she broke up. She marked it on the calendar when it occurred.
I even marked it on the calendar when it shifted. The night that it happened, my friend Cheryl was just telling me about how, what we believe we then create.
And we have a reversal here that says, I've been molested.
I've been molested.
And again.
I've been molested.
I think you disagree that's fairly clear, and that enabled her to open up and talk about a whole series of molestations she'd had when she was a young girl, which was affecting her current relationships today. So its applications in therapy are very exciting, and in information gathering and getting to the core issues.
And it's always things that are sort of deep in the subconscious, or is it just on the surface that might come out soon in therapy anyway?
Sorry, it's always been what from the subconscious?
Is it deep in the subconscious, or are these things that would be sort of on the tip of our tongue otherwise?
Oh, well, sometimes information will come out anyway in normal conversation, but a lot of our psychological issues are buried very deep within the unconscious, and the person may not know on a conscious level, and no amount of talk will get it out. And we only have access to less than 10% of our total mind, and the unconscious can carry many issues around that we've never dealt with, and we have no conscious knowledge that they are affecting us.
Now, this sounds like something pretty powerful. Is this something that anybody can do as well as anyone else? That is to say, if I took maybe the file of this interview and reversed it in the computer, could I find all the little pieces of reverse speech? Because I can hear what you've played pretty clearly.
Yeah, oh, sure. It's like any skill. It takes a bit of practice to get used to it. But certainly, many people will find reversals on the very. They'll find reversals on the very first time they start looking. There's lots of software that you can download for free on the internet that will play tapes in reverse, and you can start off and run it through and see what you find. Now, the more you do, like any art, the better you will get at defining those clear reversals. But I'm sure if you were to reverse our interview here, you would find 1 or 2 choice reversals. You might even find out what I'm planning to do for the rest for the rest of the day.
Now, let me ask you, I'm just out of curiosity, how did you get into this, and did you discover it yourself, or did you learn from others how powerful this could be?
Well, I first heard about backward messages in rock and roll back in the early 80s, and there had been a controversy for many, many years. I certainly didn't pioneer the rock and roll stuff, but once I heard about it, I was actually running a halfway house to street kids. I'm a youth worker by profession, and some of my kids came in and said to me, David, have you heard what's on the back of records? And the whole thing was fairly new to me. I'd never heard it before, but I'm an electronics buff. I went home and got some new equipment out and started running these musical tapes in reverse, and was quite surprised to hear what they claimed they were hearing. I only accidentally stumbled across it in normal human speech, purely by mistake. Now I'm the first person to explore the phenomenon in speech, and I'm also the first person to provide an explanation for it as a twofold language process. But I was not intending to find it in human speech. I was looking at music, but this is the first example I found in speech, and this is I'd actually got hold of a compilation of old radio broadcasts. I was looking for some old songs to find some messages on, and I came across this clip from Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. So here it is, forwards.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And you play this in reverse, and he says, "Man will spacewalk."
Never spacewalk.
And again.
Never spacewalk.
And that was the very first example I heard in speech, and I was quite stunned. I thought, gee whiz. It's one thing to hear it in music. It's sort of a bit of an interesting phenomenon, but to suddenly hear it in human speech, and I started wondering, well, gee whiz, if it's on Neil Armstrong, is it on other people as well? And so I started recording conversations with friends who came over, and news clippings, news broadcasts on the TV. This was back in '84 when I started, and then I worked on it for 3 years. I wrote my first book in 1987, where I proposed a theory of reverse speech, where I maintain this is a natural function of the mind. All of us are speaking both forwards and reverse. So whilst I wasn't the first person to pioneer it in music, I was the first one to pioneer it in speech and put the theories forwards to explain it.
Are your books still available, or for people to find?
Well, they aren't in the bookstores anymore now, but you can get them from my website. If you go to reversespeech.com, and that's all in one word, reversespeech.com, and click on the product section. There's 3 books that I've got available now that you can buy, and I'm just in the process of starting to write another book now as well. So you can currently only get them through my website.
And it's interesting, earlier you mentioned rock and roll and a lot of the instances in music. And, in this country, I know we had people bringing out things like Paul is Dead, and there was a famous one, It's Fun to Smoke Marijuana, in one song. And there was a controversy about that as maybe people trying to get nefarious messages to people subconsciously. But that's actually not intentional. That's just coming out of whatever was in the singer's mind as it happened?
Right. Well, no, they aren't intentional. The religious fundamentalists claim that this is all a big satanic occultic plot to brainwash the youth of our society. But, sure, you hear reversal, it's fun to smoke marijuana on the group Queen, and back in the 70s, drugs was all the big craze, and so to hear messages of drugs on rock and roll is not so surprising, because that's what they were all doing back in the 70s. You probably won't find as many drug references now. The music industry seems to be a lot cleaner than it was back in the 60s and 70s, and also back then too, you had a lot of groups involved in the occult and Satan worship, and so you find those reversals because that's where they were involved in. But you can look at some other examples, and I'm just trying to find one. Look, here's a really classic one. I like this one. This is a reversal on Marilyn Monroe. So this is on a song. So this was probably back in the 1950s, I would imagine. Let's just play this forward.
Not in church, I'm gonna find my place.
And here we have a sort of nefarious reversal that says he'll come out full of magic.
He'll come out full of magic.
And I'll do it one more time.
He'll come out full of magic.
And there's a whole lot of reversals in music that have got nothing to do with drugs or sex or the occult, but, have really, you can find some really nice reversals on love songs, and which are really quite uplifting. And it's just a shame that the music that got the publicity was the sex, drugs, and Satan reversals, and it put a bit of a black mark on the whole field, which I've been trying to overcome for 24 years now, because I maintain there's nothing occultic or spiritual or anything to this. It's just a natural part of the mind, just like body language is an unconscious communication, so is reverse speech.
Yeah, in our last couple of minutes, I'll ask you, how do you think it works that the mind creates speech that goes backwards at the same time as forwards? That sounds like actually a very complex operation for the brain to handle.
Oh, sure. Well, the brain is capable of reversing functions anyway. We know this for a fact. The sight is reversed by the lenses of the eyes, for example, so it's processed by the brain. In some extreme cases of dyslexia, people will actually talk backwards and read backwards. The brain is a very powerful thing. I believe reverse speech is coming from the right brain hemisphere, and forward speech is coming from the left brain, somewhere in the corpus callosum. The two combine together. But sure, very complex function. But then the brain's an amazing organ.
Mm-hmm. Well, this also, I imagine, has applications in other areas like espionage and such things as
sure.
that. Has that been picked up in sort of other diverse fields besides just psychology and police work?
I'm asked that question quite a lot. In the early 90s, I did a series of lectures in Washington, D.C. to various intelligence agencies on reverse speech. They received it very well. And I had promises of research grants and all sorts of things. None of that came about. I've heard rumours over the years that the CIA and the Secret Service are using reverse speech, but I can't confirm any of those rumours. They're just rumours. But I certainly did give lectures and presented my work to these agencies in the early 90s. Whether some of them have run with it and done their own work on it, I'm not too sure. But I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised.
Mm-hmm. And now, reverse speech has kind of. What kind of reactions have you got from the scientific community at large? Because it seems like there's been apart from yourself, I haven't heard of a lot of research in this area, which is surprising.
Yeah, no, there's a surprising lack of interest in the whole field. I haven't had a great deal of success in getting mainstream academia to look at reverse speech. There was a university here in Australia called Monash University that ran some tests on reverse speech and blind testing. The tests that they conducted showed that the reversals did exist and could be heard, but they basically debunked the whole theory because it didn't fit into current linguistic guidelines, and so their ultimate conclusion was, even though the reversals could be here, it didn't make sound linguistic sense. And there's been a few other institutions that have done some work on reverse speech, but it's been very sparse, and it's actually been one of my biggest disappointments in the 24 years that I've been doing this, that I haven't been able to get more academic interest in my work. It's not that they're ultimately debunking it, it's just that they're really ignoring it. And I maintain that I've got enough evidence that I've compiled over the last 24 years to raise some very serious questions that, there really is something to
mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's very convincing, and the examples you played seem very clear with the reverse messages that we've heard. And I want to thank you very much for coming on the program, David Oates. And your website...
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Your website, again, is reversespeech.com, right?
Uh-huh. And maybe I can get a phone number out, if that's okay. We have a toll-free number in the United States. It's 866-978-5910. 866-978-5910, if anyone wants any more information.
All right, great. 866-978-5910. David Oates, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. You're most welcome.
All right, goodbye. That was David Oates, an expert on reverse speech from reversespeech.com. You are listening to the Bronze Age of Radio on WHRW 90.5 FM, Binghamton, New York, college and community radio in the Southern Tier. I'm Charles Berman, And right now we're going to take a brief station break while you hear some very important station announcements. Thank you for tuning in.